founder and the CEO of Electoral Calculus, Martin Baxter. Martin, welcome to the show. A man with genuine insight. Always a delight to have you. Now, Martin, I know you have software at your fingertips, wizardry you're capable of. I wanted to ask you, purely in the realms of projection, 6 million votes, Nigel Farage is saying the Reform Party could get. Of course, he would say that, wouldn't he? If Martin Baxter, that were to happen, what would that mean in terms of seats for the Reform Party?
Well, at the moment, we're predicting them to get about 3 million. So they'd be doing twice as well as they are doing in the polls. And that would be something like as well as they did at the EU elections back in 2019, where they got 30% of the vote. If Reform got into the 30s, then yes, they would win a lot of seats. They would probably be the largest party. But we've got to remember that's not where they are at the moment. That on our average weekly poll of polls, Reform are at 15%, 7% behind the Conservatives, taking an average over all the polls. I know we had one poll where Reform were ahead of the Conservatives, but that's not the trend. The trend is that the Conservatives are still ahead, but Reform have been gaining ground over the last few weeks as Nigel Farage has come into the frame.
Now, Martin, you understand polls better than perhaps anybody we have on this show. Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, they've been complaining that they are suppressed in the polls because they are marked as other. They're not put forward, they're not prompted by their name. Is that a fair criticism? And if that were to happen, might we see an uptick in the actual numbers that Reform are polling at?
Well, that's one pollster, that's Savanta that do that. And Savanta were quite accurate at the last election, so I wouldn't want to say that their methodology is poor. But the great thing about taking an average of the polls is you take an average of the pollsters' methodology. That YouGov, as you talked about, have Reform doing well. Other pollsters have Reform doing not quite as well. Take the average, it gives you an idea of where we probably are. And the average is Reform are at 15%, which is good for them. It's higher than the Liberal Democrats, but they won't really start to win a large number of seats until they get it really into the high 20s of support. They need to be above 25%, so that they will they will overtake the Conservatives in terms of vote much more easily than they overtake the Conservatives in terms of seats. But at the moment, neither of those is happening. The Conservatives' actual danger at the moment is being overtaken by the Liberal Democrats in terms of seats and having Ed Davey as leader of the opposition. So the Conservatives are under attack from both the left and the right at the moment.
Martin, it's Chris Hope here in the studio with Martin here. So over 25 points in the polls, how many MPs would that give Nigel Farage's Reform? That clearly is what he's thinking. He's got to maintain a degree of momentum and get above 25%. But what does that mean in seats in Parliament?
And seats, it starts very slowly under first past the post. So I've got the numbers here. At 25%, he's still only on 3 seats. But if he gets to 30%, it's over 20 seats. And if he gets to 35, it's up to 40 seats. And then it would probably grow very quickly after 35.
But Martin, one of the problems there, sorry, you say 35%, and that's the figure which Labour's on, according to the YouGov poll, and they're forecast 300 seats, not just 30 seats or 35. Why is this system so weighted against a party like Reform UK?
I would say it's partly because Reform and the Brexit Party have had a strategy different, say, from the Lib Dems and the Greens, who like to build up support locally, build up local councillors, campaigning strength, and build up, as it were, hotspots of support. Reform support is quite high, but it's very evenly spread over the country. It's not so concentrated in particular places. And that makes it very hard to win seats under first past the post. Because, for instance, the SNP, whose support is all concentrated in Scotland, and in terms of national vote share is not very high, but they can win a lot of seats in Scotland, or they did last time. So under our electoral system, it helps to have your votes piling up in particular places rather than being evenly spread a little bit everywhere.
But Martin, might, for example, very highly localised campaigns in specific seats be an effective way of doing? We see in by-elections, for example, Liberal Democrats incredibly effective when they just lump all their resources into one area. Might that be something the Reform Party could be doing, which might, in a sense, go under the radar on the polls?
We'd probably see it in local elections. So the Lib Dems and the Greens, you get advance warning through the local election strength. Reform did not contest the local elections, particularly back in May, so they don't have that support to build on. Obviously, in seats like Clacton and Boston, Skegness, where they've got very high-profile candidates, then yes, they can absolutely have local factors there. But we look very closely in our figures for where there's hotspots bubbling away for minor parties. We see it for the Lib Dems, we've seen it for the Greens in Brighton and Bristol, but we're not seeing it particularly for Reform other than where their high-profile names are standing.
Okay, Martin Baxter, the CEO of Electoral Calculus, thank you very much for giving us some common sense and some data there. There's lots of kind of excitement, of course, but the reality is the system is very, very stacked against the smaller parties. Martin Baxter, thank you very much